Well, my guest, he moved toward the possibility of Donald Trump, but now it's been a long run. We'll talk about it.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I know that's a strange opening. I'm not sure I said it exactly the way I wanted to. Too many shows, Christmas season, I lost my glasses, everything is going on, right? I mean, it's just one of those things. But Joe Cammarano, who has been a good friend of the show here for quite some time, the PC political science professor, originally came to this broadcast and talked about a 90% chance that Hillary Clinton would win the election. And to his credit, as he continued to evolve and analyze what was a very difficult political science project here, the numbers started to come down. It started to come down. I'd get viewer email about his comfort zone for Hillary Clinton, and of course on the radio he would get his dose of phone call aggravation. But he has discussed over the course of time that this race was out of the box. Well, that's not new news to most of us, but the way you analyze races has been changed maybe forever based on this election, and we'll hear from the professor. And he'll talk about how he went from 90% to Hillary to Donald Trump's actual election. And of course, the Electoral College signed off on it yesterday. Welcome in. Great to have you aboard. We're going to skip the rundown. This conversation is probably something you'll see once or twice over the course of the holidays when we take a little time off, even though you're seeing it originally here on this Tuesday night. Here's the headline: electors remain faithful. Yes, they do. And here's an update on it and the transition altogether.
Donald Trump walked the grounds of his Mar-a-Lago, Florida resort yesterday after the Electoral College cemented him as the next president of the United States. "We did it," he wrote on Twitter. "Thank you to all my great supporters. We just officially won the election, despite all the distorted and inaccurate media."
Donald J. Trump.
As the Electoral College met at state houses across the country, a long-shot effort to upend the presidential vote proved ineffective.
Texas now puts President Trump over the top.
Trump won 306 electoral votes on election night, and just 2 of them successfully voted for someone else yesterday. 5 of Hillary Clinton's electors cast ballots for other candidates. 2 other faithless electors were replaced before they could vote. Also Monday, the president-elect responded to the deadly truck crash at a Berlin Christmas market by labeling it a terrorist attack before investigators reached that conclusion, tweeting, "Today there were terror attacks in Turkey, Switzerland, and Germany, and it is only getting worse. The civilized world must change thinking." The Trump campaign confirmed the president-elect had dinner with Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim over the weekend. They criticized each other during the election.
And so that's the latest. Joe Cammarano joins us. Welcome. Merry Christmas. Good to see you.
Merry Christmas.
We had 90% Hillary Clinton feeling at the very beginning. Now listen, you've had a half a dozen visits since, so it was the scale slid. And we talked just before Election Day, and you were very clear that there was a stronger possibility. We all had that funny feeling on Election Day, didn't we? I had I'm not going to be a Monday morning quarterback and say I knew it.
Well,
but
yeah, a couple of things. First, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, and so the national polls actually were right on target. There was nothing wrong with the national polls, nothing wrong with the aggregate predictions. It was a close race. It was predicted she had a margin, and she won. Where we did poorly is on the state polls, and understanding that, of course, with the Electoral College, it's a state-by-state battle, and that the ultimate president will be from the Electoral College, and that closeness was underestimated in the Midwest particularly. So we're beginning to sort of pick up some of the patterns and some of the reasons, but we have to remember, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, period, by a very significant margin. The gap between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is the largest gap between a loser and who got more votes than the winner in our history, percentage-wise, not just vote-wise. So, Hillary Clinton did win that half of the election. Doesn't matter. Our rules are such that Donald Trump is president. All I'm saying is, when people call you, oh, you didn't know what you were talking about.
Right.
That basically, in a close election, you have what exactly we saw. you have that possibility. And yeah, I did sense some things going on. What struck me was Pennsylvania the night before the election. Before going to Philadelphia, Hillary Clinton didn't even bother going to the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, or the Pittsburgh. To me, that indicated that they were giving up in that area, which was trouble. That didn't mean that I knew that she was in trouble, but the second I saw results coming in from Virginia, really early, about 7:20, 7:30, I started to worry. Worry because my prediction, but, and worry as a political scientist who, again, believes that there should be standards and there should be expertise in the White House. And as a political scientist, not as a partisan, I know people have a hard time separating that. I am, a little concerned about the inexperience.
Ditto. Look, here's the interesting thing. I get feedback from, a smaller active number of viewers and listeners who are fed up with me and my perspective on this election, fed up with people like you who come in here and talk about it the way we do. What's really interesting is that you still, at least in this region, can't find, other than campaign co-chair people, you can't find people who come in with your equitable expertise who talk about this being a great development for America. It's very hard, and so as you get frustrated watching this conversation, feel free to let us know here at Dan York State of Mind that you've got a perspective that you want to have seen here. I can't change the way I think, and you can't change the way you think, but I think it's really interesting that you feel like you can parse your political science perspective and your personal perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, not 100%, but probably 95%, yeah. Sure. And I'll tell you some things that I'm not worried about that most people are with regard to Trump, if we have time.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure.
Right now, why not? We're
sure.
loose.
I think, first of all, a lot of people are upset that he has all these generals, and I actually think having generals in these cabinet positions or cabinet level positions is a good thing because they're the perfect professionals who do know all sorts of nuance in the world, and actually they're well trained, and these days generals are guardians as much as they are warriors. National Security Advisor might be an exception to that, but I think the Department of Defense is going to be well served by having Mattis in charge. So I think that's the first thing. I think the more experience in the cabinet, the better. Elaine Chao, yeah, she's the wife of Mitch McConnell, but she's an insider. She's one of these people he was going to drain out of Washington. I'm glad he's not doing that fully. I'm a little more worried about people without any kind of governmental experience.
Like
Tillerson. I think Tillerson, again, I'm not as worried about Tillerson because this is a very, very sophisticated, very smart, very shrewd, very experienced guy. My concern is that he's been so focused on promoting the interest of one corporation and one sector of our economy, ExxonMobil, and I'm worried about that myopic tendency.
We'll have to talk about the Secretary of State's nomination process. I'm sure will be a little turbulent. I'm guessing they're not going to throw down on the Secretary of State, but they may turn away somebody. They may turn away the new EPA director. The Republicans might even want to just stand up and say to Donald Trump, you know what? Not everything is going to be rubber stamped. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But in the election, again, this notion of the Electoral College it's a duh factor, of course. But it seemed like most of the pollsters, pundits, political scientists missed Pennsylvania in general. Philadelphia actually came in on target, right?
Yes.
But it wasn't enough. In fact, the party bosses, so to speak, who delivered Philadelphia have no guilty conscience at this point because they delivered exactly what they needed to.
Yeah.
Yet there seems to be this, you say she maybe gave up on Wilkes-Barre Scranton. They had early data or late data that showed that there was a problem. It seems like there were some traditional Democratic strategists, Joe Biden, even Bill Clinton, who were saying, you're missing the Rust Belt, you're missing a segment of a kind of voter out there, you're not paying attention to them, and it could bite us in the rear end, and it did, didn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there were some tactical errors, and there were a couple big strategic errors. And again, one of the things that I think is the weakness of the Clinton campaign is these were very smart, very well-seasoned people, but they were very uncreative. And, campaigning is a lot of science, but also a lot of interpretive art. They didn't seem to have that interpretive ability, and I think that's why they missed the rural shift, or the ex-urban shift.
Bill Clinton blames Director Comey. We got a headline on that. I can understand why. Bill Clinton, thought it was Comey and thought it was the hacking. And didn't take a lot of responsibility for his own visit with the Attorney General on a plane that really bothered a lot of people. But the Clintons are unable to understand how the Clintons are viewed outside Clinton world, aren't they?
To some degree, I do think that's a fair criticism of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and the whole entourage around them, that they are insular, in part because they feel like they're under siege. They've been anti-media for ages, more anti-media than Trump in some ways. So yeah, I think that's part of it. I do think the Comey letter had a significant impact, particularly among white men, particularly among non-urban white men, and then also non-college educated women. So there are some indications that it did move it just a little. And remember, we're talking about tiny, tiny shifts at the last minute. That was the last straw, or the tipping point, as we might say. And so, yeah, I think Comey probably did have something to do with it, even if he isn't responsible necessarily.
All right, when we come back, Joe and I talked about being kinder to each other as we got toward the end of the election. It's been a rough ride, pretty rough ride getting into. Thank goodness we put elections up against the Christmas season. But we'll talk about that and the nature of Donald Trump and the way he's comporting himself when we come back. Stay with us. Make America great again. Listen, this president-elect is, well, he's unique, and everybody knows that. At our opening story there from CBS, we look at this tweeting that goes on over what I think to every common sense viewer appeared to be a terrorist attack based on what happened in France, whatever. Do you think the media is splitting hairs and picking at him by suggesting that he didn't have it confirmed and shouldn't have been tweeting about it? Or are we just getting to the point where I don't even know how to react to that at this point?
I just wish we'd stop paying attention to the tweets. They're really not substantive. They're sort of self-validation attempts. And he did predict that it was a terrorist attack, and it does appear as if it was one. But who cares? I mean, again, common sense. When I heard that, I knew it was a terrorist attack. Let's just not even follow the tweets anymore.
We're conditioned to a kind of formality of process from the White House and reacting to world catastrophes. So we are conditioned to hear that the White House expresses concern, and then we're conditioned to hear that the White House is reviewing the details, and then we're conditioned to hearing that indications are, and then the statements will come, and then there's a condemnation process, and there's a pattern of White Houseian behavior that we're used to, that he is breaking as president-elect.
Right.
Bother you?
Of course it bothers me. The reason there's this sort of tentativeness and very methodical process is if you get it wrong, it could kill people. If after in 2001, after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, what happened? There were all sorts of attacks on people. There was a poor Sikh who was stopped in Providence and detained because they thought he was a terrorist. And you don't want to necessarily precipitate irrational behavior, the mob, kind of that mob reaction, because our impulses are sometimes right, but they're not always right, and they're not always completely right. And so, yeah, it bothers me that he does this. I don't think it makes a big deal out of anything. I mean, I don't even follow his tweets. I don't think it's important to know what he's tweeting. I think it's important to know what the president says, or the president-elect says. And if he's going to tweet it, maybe we should stop paying attention to him. Maybe he'll do it in a more appropriate way.
I don't know what to make of that analysis.
Stop paying attention to the stuff that doesn't matter. That's what I'm saying.
The media is never, the press, the media organizations, the news organizations that churn out content 24 hours a day are never going to be able to look away from a presidential tweet. They accept it now as a new platform for communication.
They do.
They're bothered by the direct communication with Americans versus the filter of the news. Maybe when we finally get a press conference of some kind from this guy, and something of normalcy settles into the way we hear from him, there'll be less significance.
Right. The media have traditionally been what's called linkage institution, that they linked citizens and government so that we knew what was going on and so that they could communicate with us in a way that made sense so that we can make good decisions and they could do things methodically. That's gone, but one of the reasons you have the media is because people often misinterpret, misunderstand, and I'm sorry, a lot of people who are, sort of believe things they believe because they see it on the president-elect's Twitter feed need to kind of grow up, and the best way to do that is to sort of stop emphasizing because you're worried everyone else is going to emphasize, which of course is what the media do.
I don't know, that's a really interesting take. I mean, you seem like you're blaming the receivers of the information rather than the one who's actually putting the information out.
I've been blaming the American people for a long time. We're not responsible citizens. I mean, the responsible citizen actually gathers information and discerns it themselves. Doesn't take it spoon-fed from anybody. But that began to change in the late 80s with Rush Limbaugh and other talk radio sort of phenoms. And it's been going on ever since. And the level of ignorance among the American people, the lack of knowledge of people, basic things, is astounding. And it's worse than it was 30 years ago. So yeah, we have to start growing up.
We have to start growing up past the behavior of the president-elect and perhaps the president.
Yeah, we should stop.
That's an interesting approach.
One of my mentors, Benjamin
I mean, by the way,
Barber,
I'm not going to argue the acumen
Right.
decline,
Sure.
given.
Yeah.
But
right. I'm gonna refer to one of my mentors, Benjamin Barber, who wrote an article that says when you have strong presidents, you have weak citizens. And if you want a strong democracy, you have to have strong citizens. Strong citizens take the initiative themselves, they take the responsibility themselves, and they take it seriously as if they're making the decisions about the future of their children and grandchildren. We need that, and you can't have that if everyone's dependent on some president spewing stuff that 70 to 80% we know is false. But we just let him do it anyway. It's not his fault. He's always been that way. You grew up in the New York area. I grew up in the New York area. Trump's always been this way. What's different is people are actually taking what he says and saying it's okay. He can deceive us. He can say things that are half true and not true. We're still going to like him. That's irresponsible.
I'm not sure. Where are we? I'm not sure what we do about that. What camera am I on? There. What do we do about that? Hold on.
Okay.
We'll come right back. I don't know what we do about that. Right back. This guy's a piece of work, right? And all you had to do is look at last night's program and some of our discussion on humanitarian efforts in Syria. These hero doctors, including the one from Syria who was talking about the daily exercise in Aleppo. Holy moly, we'll get to that in a second, but let me just follow up on the previous segment. What are you asking for, or what are you expecting the American people to do to, what, compensate for this guy who we know how he behaves and won't change as the President of the United States?
I say assume that your understanding of the world and your decisions about what's right and wrong and who you're going to vote for or what positions you're going to take should be based upon you gathering the information, good information, and not simply sitting back eating frozen pizza or whatever it is we eat when we watch this stuff or look on the web. We've got to be more proactive. That's what I'm saying.
Do you expect a behavioral difference in Donald Trump?
No.
Going forward?
No. Everything I know about psychology, and that was one of my cognate fields, people at his age don't change. Their fundamental character is set. And that's about it. It can happen, but it's not going to with him.
What about the people who I think haven't tried to inform themselves and are worried sick about the way he just kind of knee-jerk reacts to world events?
I think that we need to be vigilant. I think we need to be a little less complacent about getting active, and that's on all sides, by the way. And I also think we need to reach out to those who are supporters of Trump and the Trump administration. To actually find common ground.
Well, we talked about that being nicer to each other. I think we offered that conversation in the context that Hillary Clinton was most likely going to win the election. Now we've got some spiking in the end zone from Trump folks, but we have a lot of hand-wringing and crying going on from the Clinton types, and all that stuff is predictable, but I think it's been hyperbolized.
I agree, but it's again, it's not unlike, I've been thinking back to 2000, I've been reading a lot about what happened in 1968, and so I think this is normal, and we got to let that go. But yeah, I do think that the losers in this case need to just move on.
We don't have time to put the actual story out on the assassination yesterday of the ambassador to Turkey, the Russian ambassador to Turkey. I mean, the media's constant, play of this video is, I think just a conversation in and of itself. I mean, holy cow. But Russian intervention, Senate hearings, WikiLeaks, Putin, the new Secretary of State nominee, this particular incident. Russia is in the middle of everything with us right now.
Yes, Russia is, and Turkey is as well. And so I think this assassination has very profound implications, which is another reason why we all need to be informed, because maybe our kids are going to have to go into battle because of things that are happening.
You think war is coming?
I don't think war is coming, and again, I think the generals might prevent it. Generals are the last ones who want to fight a war, but once they do it, they try to win it.
Who after who? I mean, obviously Syria is such a mess. Extricating that whole thing and trying to bring some peace is the biggest puzzle in the world. Russia, ally of Assad. We think Assad's got to go, but who knows what Donald Trump's perspective on it is, because who knows?
Right. President-elect Trump had talked about a safe place in Syria. We're going to have to we're going to have to send troops to keep that place safe. So that's the most likely candidate, but it could be more in Iraq, more in Afghanistan.
This assailant is screaming about Russia and Syria and Aleppo and those kinds of things. So clearly he had he was not a typical terrorist. He was somebody that was angry about what was going on, a security guy. It just adds more drama to and tragedy, I think, to a saga that seems like there's no way out.
Right, and again, this harkens back to authoritarianism, both Assad, Erdogan, Putin, now in Poland, and go to the Philippines. It's a worldwide phenomenon. So one of the reasons Trump won is because he's part of this worldwide trend to go back toward these strong leaders. And these strong leaders are authoritarian in their tendencies. And we're going to see more authoritarians.
I don't think the presidents of the United States, no matter who he is, will ever get away with an authoritarian exercise for too very long.
An American version is very mild, if any. You're right.
Any more predictions?
I predict that Trump won't be as calamitous as many of my cohorts and friends and colleagues think.
That's reassuring.
And I think he's going to have a lot of trouble with Congress in a year.
Because?
Because he doesn't like sharing the spotlight, and Congress thinks that they're controlling him right now.
But that's his party.
No, it's not his party. He ran on the label. He took him over.
Appreciate your insight this year. Merry Christmas. Happy
Merry
New
Christmas.
Year.
Happy New Year.
Joe Cammarano. Final word and we come back. Stay with us. Saying to Joe during our final break that a lot of you are probably puzzled as to what your obligations are right now. Study up, be informed, don't take your president-elect and now president-to-be seriously all the time. Do your own intel. It's going to be... I like the prediction of less calamitous, though. That made me feel better, for at least Christmas season. You got questions about how the healthcare system works now that we're in this huge transition from Obama to whatever Trump care or care less is? An expert on that tomorrow.